Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more.
Hello and welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville news, government, education, business, weather, really whatever gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder of Compass, and I am hosting again this week, filling in for my colleague, Scott Barker, the editor of Compass. He will be rejoining us next week. But I am accompanied, as always, by Lord Seth Barber, our producer here at Barbarian Productions. Did you like that, Seth? I made you a full partner this time.
Yeah, well, I'm not a full partner, but I'm a full person, and then I'm still. I feel like we might have come to an accord here, and I'm officially. I think you've redeemed your mistake now. You feel
your dignity has been restored. Yeah. Well, great. So
it wasn't much to start with, but it's definitely back to its low regular.
And I will, even in Scott's absence, I will continue the tradition, Seth, of asking you for the 3-day-old weather forecast, which is kind of particularly fraught this week because we're recording this Friday morning, and of course we are all looking at all of these different forecasts of what might happen over the next 48 hours. And by the time anybody is listening to this, you'll be either in the middle of that or at the back end of it. So we don't really know at the moment.
It's hard to feel like a winter Armageddon is about to befall on us at the moment here on Friday morning, early afternoon, whatever. It's a gorgeous Friday. It's a little chilly, but not crazy cold. Sun's out. Skies are blue. They're going to turn gray, and we'll get some sort of precipitation. It's just what and how long it sticks to the ground, and again, what it is sticking to the ground. That's really the question. And so I'm with you, Jesse. I think for our now post-dated forecast, I'm going to say we've seen some snowflakes, we've seen some ice and stuff, but it's cold and wet on Sunday morning. And it's going to be cold and wet all day Sunday. And by Monday, it should be fine. I'm guessing we're going to be all right. So we'll see. I've had plenty of predictions on here that have been totally wrong already. So I'll continue my unwavering ability to blindly predict things and knowing that I'm probably going to be proven wrong.
Well, we will all find out soon. I certainly don't have any plans to do anything much this weekend. A bunch of things have already been canceled, sort of prospectively, various events that were scheduled on Saturday and Sunday, because even if the weather doesn't turn out to be bad, I think a lot of people have already kind of adopted the mentality of I'm just going to sit home. I mean, I don't know if you have been out to grocery stores in the last couple of days, Seth, but I've been to several stores, and you would think like the zombie apocalypse is upon us, like the shelves are just empty.
I mean, I get it. I don't blame people. I understand it. It's just, like we had a good one last year that stuck around, and that was anomalous. That we had one that stuck for almost a full week of kind of complications. I think the kids had the whole week off of school that week too. Although I had no problems going out and carrying on with normal business, but I could understand the perspective of you might as well. At the end of the day, you're still going to drink that milk next week anyway. So this way, you at least have it if you are stuck in the house. And I mean, to my end, I made something I was planning on doing anyway that I'm going ahead and doing today instead of next week or something like that, was to get a larger propane tank for our heating system. In the case that we do lose power, we're going to be bored in the dark, but not cold. So at least take one of those things off the list and be warm in the dark and bored.
Yeah,
rather
which
than
is much
cold.
better. I was at Target, and I was behind a guy in line who literally had an entire Target shopping cart full of propane, just 25 cans or something.
Yeah.
Like he was, and like you say, like that stuff keeps. And so if you don't use it this weekend, you'll have it to, have cookouts in the summer or whatever. All right. Well, we do have, whatever happens with the weather, there were some other things that happened last week that we can talk about. Natalie Haslam, very well-known local philanthropist, member of obviously very prominent Knoxville family. She passed away. we are going to have an interview coming up, or a conversation, I guess I should say, with one of our own correspondents, Thomas Fraser, who wrote a good article for Compass this week about an interesting planned project at Oak Ridge National Lab involving the search for fusion energy. So we'll get to hear Thomas fill us in a little bit on that. City Council, the new City Council, the 5 new members who all joined just last month, had a meeting this week where some of those members took the unusual step of delaying a couple of grants because they wanted to study them more. We'll look at that. The state legislature, Republicans in the Tennessee General Assembly, have introduced a package of bills related to immigration enforcement. And these have been developed in concert with the White House. Talk about that a little bit. But to start out, we'll hit on another topic that came before City Council this week and was approved, which is the purchase of new cameras and drones for the Knoxville Police Department. And this is it was a $9.4 million package, which basically builds on the city's existing contract with Axon Enterprise. Axon Enterprise is a big private security company, previously known as Taser, because it's the company that makes the Taser, and Axon still does produce Tasers, and purchase of, I think, about 116 new Tasers is part of this package, but only part of it because Axon also makes the body-worn cameras that KPD officers wear. After some years ago now, KPD switched to equipping all of its officers with body-worn cameras for transparency and accountability, so that after something happens, if something happens that needs to be investigated, there's footage and data available to show more of what actually transpired. So part of this $9.4 million is buying 65 new cameras, and the reason they need 65 new cameras, in addition to the ones they already have, is good news, certainly from KPD's standpoint and the city's standpoint. They have a bunch of new officers. There has been an aggressive recruiting push by KPD in recent years to get up to what they call fully staffed. For a long time, KPD was budgeted at a staffing level of 415 or so uniformed officers, and they had not reached that level in years because they had people constantly retiring. It was a struggle to get qualified people into the academy, but they have been successful at that. Part of that is, of course, the city raised salaries for KPD pretty substantially a few years ago. That was the big driver behind the property tax increase that the Kincannon administration passed. I think that was back in 2022. And so those increased salaries and incentives have helped with recruiting. So now they have the good problem from KPD's standpoint of a bunch of new officers who they need to equip. So that's part of what they're buying here. The part of this contract that I think got the most attention from us, from council members, and from some people who asked some questions about it, is they are purchasing 12 new drones. These are Skydio, that's a brand name, Skydio X10 drones, which are part of the Axon Enterprise family of security equipment. And KPD is going to use these to create what they're calling the Drone as First Responder program, which is something a lot of police departments around the country have been moving toward. And, when you say first responder, like, these are pretty small drones, and they're very agile. And so they can get them up in the air and out to a location pretty quickly. Now, they're not first responders in the sense of an EMT showing up or
they're not going to be administering CPR to somebody who's down on the ground and having a heart attack.
Right. Or responding to They're not there to like take out bad guys or anything like that. Like these are basically eyes in the sky. And so they can use them to get out to a scene, whether it's the scene of like a bad traffic accident or, something worse going on, like a shooting incident or something. They can get them on site before even their own officers arrive there. And the drone operators can be gathering information on scene and conveying that to then whether it's police officers or the fire department sending EMTs, whoever's coming to respond to the scene, and quickly sort of assess what's going on and convey all of that information so that even by the time somebody shows up on the scene, they will arrive with more information about what to expect when they get there. And like, for example, Scott Erland, who's the communications manager for KPD, told us in an article that we ran about this, he said, and this is a quote from him, "It's been a challenge for decades that officers respond to calls for service with information that's extremely limited, sometimes incorrect, and is changing in real time." And so this way they can get the drones out there and start getting more reliable information more quickly, especially if you kind of couple that. Like in a lot of cases, maybe you'll have somebody from the scene calling in and they might be on the phone with 911 conveying whatever they're able to see there. And so then if you can combine that with then whatever feed the drone is able to provide back to the drone operators and then to the officers responding, you can just get a better picture of it. It's worth noting that all of these kinds of technologies do raise some concerns, and some of those were expressed in the discussion around this, about privacy, about, the ability. Now, I don't think anybody would raise a lot of concerns about sending a drone to a car accident and that kind of thing. I think where people might start to get less comfortable or have questions about it, and we've seen this certainly in other places. Like, let's say you have a big demonstration of some kind, political protest, and that would be a natural place to have a drone or two up in the air just to keep an eye on things, and in case something happens, whether that's a car hitting a protester or somebody getting in a fight or whatever. Like, you can have that video in real time and then also have it to look at later to understand what happened. But also, theoretically, it could be used for facial identification. I mean, all of this technology is getting so good now that it does provide the possibility for surveillance, for maybe less benign uses of that kind of technology.
Right. What measures are in place to stop KPD or some agency that has this technology at their disposal to use it for nefarious political ends, where they, they're at a scene of a protest, as you said, and they are identifying, they're keeping an eye on it, but then they're using the technologies that's available to go ahead and identify everybody that's there. And then all of a sudden that comes back to some future thing that you're dealing with because you happen to be in that crowd because the issue was important to you. But now all of a sudden there's data on you that is more or less otherwise unattainable to, at least to me and you regular citizens,
right,
that can now be used against you in some future politics thing for your own sake, or some future legal matter for your own sake, that it may or may not have anything to do with it, but they could use it to establish a pattern of, a pattern of muckraking, for lack of a better word.
Right. Well, and that's like, these are KPD drones, and so that footage will belong to KPD, but it also creates a record then that, let's say you don't trust the federal law enforcement entities at some particular time because maybe the FBI has been heavily politicized by an administration bent on retribution and vengeance against its political enemies. I mean, just throwing a hypothetical out there, that then becomes a record that theoretically the FBI could come in and say, let me see your footage from the No Kings protest and that kind of thing. So, there are now, and a counter argument to that is that nobody in public has an expectation of privacy. As we've talked about here before, as journalists, we rely on the fact that if something's happening in public, we can go there, we can take photos of it, we can take video of it, as can any other bystanders, anybody there with a phone. And so that's true. We don't have an expectation of privacy. I think that the question just becomes, when the technology gets so good, and when this kind of technology is like, we all have phones, but we don't all have drones. And so when it's law enforcement that has the best surveillance technology, how far can you push that, the idea that if you're in a public place, you're just open to like really intimate surveillance?
Well, to me, like there's always the standard that I've always taken on. It's like, well, in that a normal person could perceive you in public is you lose your right to privacy against that. Well, this isn't a normal person anymore. Like I always go to stuff like on my in my yard, in my backyard where I have a privacy fence, you can't see me from the street.
Right.
Well, when you fly that drone 100 feet in the air, you can now see me in my backyard.
That's right. And you can do that because you don't own the air rights over your property.
Right. And so where does my right for privacy go in that context? And it's like, well, I'm in a private place on my private property and all those private things, but you can see it from, quote, public space because you have a special piece of equipment that you can do that with. And, where I at least have a moral objection to my kid flying his drone over my neighbor's backyard and filming my neighbors in their backyard. But that's my moral objection. I don't know where the legals stand on that. And then again, like we mentioned earlier, it then goes into a vast system of data that can be compiled into neat little files that may or may not be good for me and you, citizen. I'll be open. I will be fully open that I'm not a fan of this surveillance state that we were moving towards.
Well, we did say you're a libertarian.
I have a lot of issues with this, and like I always struggle with the correct legal argument against the lack of right to privacy in public situations. But there's a line here somewhere, and I can't. My failure to articulate it doesn't mean that I don't think it's bad.
Well, and from the point of view of law enforcement and first responders in general, like obviously this can be a very useful tool for a lot of the kinds of things that they respond to. And as I said, I don't think there would be a lot of objections to a lot of those uses. It's thinking about, but what else could this be used for? Interestingly, this past week, just as our city council was approving this package, and of course, our city council has also approved, we talked about this last week, the installation of these new, very high-tech, sophisticated cameras that KPD is using at multiple locations around town as part of their real-time information system. So they're deploying, we are deploying more cameras, more places. The Nashville Metro Council also met this past Tuesday, and they voted down a proposed enhancement of security cameras in and around the downtown area in Nashville. There's a business coalition, Nashville Downtown Partnership, made up similar to the Downtown Knoxville Alliance that we have here, made up of downtown business owners and property owners in Nashville. They had applied for and received a state grant for, I think, $15 million in Nashville to enhance various kinds of security in the downtown area. And the Metro Council actually broke that grant up into several pieces, and they pulled out a piece that was going to replace existing security cameras that are already there in downtown Nashville with much better cameras that, can see faces and license plates and whatever from a very long distance. And the council actually voted that they approved the rest of the grant, which was for various other safety enhancements downtown. But they rejected those cameras, even knowing that there already are older cameras down there operating. They just said, no, we don't want this. And this was clearly in the context of a lot of things that are going on at the federal level and at the state level. One of the councilwomen who voted against it told reporters that, just point blank, she said, I don't trust our federal government and I don't trust our state government. And I don't want to give them, like, as we were just saying, like, I don't want to give them more surveillance capacity in the middle of our downtown. And so they rejected that. We haven't seen anywhere near that kind of concern or pushback here in Knoxville. I think Councilwoman Amelia Parker, who often raises concerns around these kinds of issues, did raise those concerns here as well. But obviously this has all been approved by City Council. So if you are ever out at the scene of an accident, an incident, some big public gathering or whatever, and you see those drones up overhead, that is probably what you're seeing, is some of these drones that KPD just purchased. Okay, let's turn our attention to the state. And we mentioned this last week, but we got more details on it this week. The state legislature, the Republican supermajority, announced sort of the week that they came back into session that they were going to be bringing a whole package of bills around immigration. And they've even given it a title. It's called Immigration Agenda 2026. So this is the thing now. I guess it's kind of based off of Project 2025. Everything has to have a sort of a branded name.
It seems like the most fun job to have, though, if you're going to be in government. I want to be the guy that names the stuff.
That names it. Well, Immigration Agenda 2026 is not a whole lot of thought seems to have gone into that. They didn't come up with any cute or clever name for it. But this is a package of bills that Republican legislators in Nashville, including some of our own legislators here from Knoxville, our State Representative Jason Zachary, who represents Farragut, he's involved in this and sponsored one of these bills. They worked on this with the White House, and specifically they worked on it with Stephen Miller, who's Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House and is really the guy who's overseeing the entire mass deportation campaign and the very aggressive use of ICE and Border Patrol agents all across the country to conduct these very aggressive enforcement actions, which we have certainly seen plenty of and heard a lot about in other places. And those actions are happening here too, just not at the same scale that we're seeing like in Minneapolis or Chicago, some of the places they've sent these masses of agents. But as we talked about here a few weeks ago, we have had immigrants working various places around the Knoxville area who have been taken from their work sites by ICE agents who just kind of roll up and grab them. So it is happening here. But the idea with this package of bills is to create a model, kind of like if states want to get more deeply involved in immigration enforcement, which is traditionally a federal responsibility, it's federal jurisdiction, like what are the ways that states can do that in a way that would help the efforts of Stephen Miller and ICE and this whole mass deportation campaign. So these bills have now started to be introduced, and they're taking various approaches, but a lot of this revolves around, first of all, just trying to reduce the presence of undocumented immigrants in Tennessee, and then secondly, trying to make sure that any undocumented immigrants who are here are not receiving government services. Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, in the press conference that they had announcing this, literally said that the goal was to make sure that if you're an undocumented immigrant, we want to make sure we're not spending taxpayer funds on you unless you're in jail. So the only public spending that they want to see on undocumented immigrants is on the law enforcement side of it. They don't want undocumented immigrants to receive any benefits from being in the state. So, for example, one of the bills, House Bill 1704, would, for the first time, make it a criminal offense to basically be an undocumented immigrant in Tennessee, which is not actually illegal here now. It's not even, when we talk about the legality of this, being in the country at the federal level, being in the country without documentation is a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. So when you talk about somebody being here illegally, that is a civil offense. It's not a felony. It's not even a misdemeanor. This bill, though, would say that if you are an immigrant who is here, who either has an existing removal order, which means that there has been some processing through the immigration system and a removal order has been issued in your name, or if you're somebody who maybe has been deported before, has been removed from the country, and has re-entered the country still without authorization, either of those circumstances, in addition to the federal issues that you would face, you would now face a state criminal issue. It would be a Class A misdemeanor, and that is punishable with up to 11 months and 29 days in jail or a fine of up to $2,500. So even though it's a misdemeanor, not a felony, it's the most serious level of misdemeanor, and obviously, spending up to a year in jail is no small thing. There's another bill that would require all government agencies in the state, both state and local, schools, everybody, to use the federal E-Verify system when you're doing hiring, which is not currently required. There's an interesting bill that kind of conflates a couple of different categories of people, because part of it is aimed at undocumented immigrants, and it would require county clerk's offices across the state, any office that issues motor vehicle registrations, which, we all have to renew our registration every year. They would all have to verify the legal status of anybody who was applying for or renewing a registration. So that would have some implication for all of us, because it would mean when you go to do that renewal, you probably have to bring your passport or whatever documentation. It's not enough, like right now, when I go in and renew my registration, I just take my registration from last year, take it in, give it to them. They look it up. They issue me a new one. I don't even remember if I have to show my driver's license for that. It's pretty straightforward. So this is going to basically give some amount of immigration enforcement responsibility to county clerks to ascertain the status of everybody who comes in, and they would not be allowed to issue a vehicle registration to somebody who couldn't show that they were here legally.
That's kind of the inverse of the Sexton statement. We're going to not collect tax revenue from you if you're not here legally.
Right. Well, yeah, because people are paying those and that's the kind of thing you could look at it and say, well, one possible result of this is just that people who can't meet that standard just won't register their vehicles. Now, if you're driving around with an out-of-date registration, obviously it opens you up to possibly being, that's one of the things you can get pulled over for, but it could, in the short term, it could lead to less revenue coming in there for sure. The other part of this bill that's interesting is, for the first time, it implements a language requirement in order to get a driver's license in the state. And basically, if you go in to get your driver's license or to renew a license, so this would only really apply to U.S. citizens or people who are in the country legally, because in Tennessee, you cannot get a driver's license unless you can prove you're here legally. And I'm sure we're all familiar with the documents you do have to take with you when you get a driver's license. So this part of the bill is really actually aimed not at undocumented immigrants, but at people who are here legally or are citizens. But it's still saying that if you can't pass the basic driver's test, the test that you have to pass to get a learner's permit and so forth, if you can't pass that in English, you are allowed to take it in a different language, which is true now. But if you do take that test and pass it in a language other than English, you're only going to be granted a 1-year license, and it will be a restricted license of the kind that are sometimes issued to people who have had like DUIs, which basically says you can only drive to school,
church,
to work. Yeah, just a very small number of places, and that you're not to be on the road. Otherwise, if you're caught on the road in any other circumstance, then you'd be subject to losing that restricted license, and it would only be for a year. And then after that year, you would have to come back and take the test again in English. And it doesn't 100% make this explicit in the bill, but the implication is strongly that, because it doesn't say anything about you could be issued another temporary one, that it's kind of a 1-year deal. You have a year to go and get proficient enough in English to come back and pass this in English. And if not, then I guess you would just not be eligible for a license at that point until you could pass that test in English. We don't have an official language in the state of Tennessee. There's no requirement that you have to speak English to be a resident of Tennessee. This looks a little bit like, a backdoor way of creating that, of saying that this is our state language here in Tennessee.
And I like this one. I put a lot of thought into because we've been talking about this on my show, and we've mentioned different parts of this in here over the last couple of weeks or whatever. And like this one, I can kind of get on board with insofar as we have this. I feel like we have this. We are stuck on this thing where driving isn't a privilege anymore. We feel like driving is a right. If you're here and you have the proper skills and you can prove them on a test or whatever, you have the right to drive. But if we're going to stay under this, driving is a privilege, then I can get the argument for. I suppose I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it personally, but if driving is a privilege, then you have to hit the standards we require to get that privilege from us. And so, and all the signs are in English and stuff like that. So at least for the devil's argument on this side, I can get a little bit of the premise of it. If you're going to, if you immigrate here and you get your paperwork done and you're here legally and you want to assimilate into Tennessee society, part of that being you need to at least be able to function on the roads in English. Now, your ability to understand and function road English versus day-to-day English is not the same thing. I would say the written test has a lot of words in English that you will never see on the roads, because you have to read in full sentences, where I'm going to guess most people, regardless of their native language, understand what stop, yield, those kind of words mean anyway. So it's a little bit of it's a tricky maneuver that I think the state's putting on to just make life difficult for some people, which I'm not a fan of, obviously. But I think it's one of those that in the broader context of what's going on nationally and what's going on with ICE and federal agencies and stuff like that, it's clear what the point is versus maybe what a more true version of the policy could be, I guess, is the point. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things to sort of consider here in terms of its real world implications. One is that we know that not allowing people to drive legally does not stop them from driving. So this is already an issue with undocumented immigrants here who can't get any kind of legal driving permit.
Or people that are just really bad drivers and had their driver's license taken away for one reason or the other.
But we have the challenge with this is that we have constructed our society in a way that most places in this country, certainly most places in Knoxville and Knox County, you kind of have to have access to a car in order to just go about your daily life, to get to work, to get to the grocery store. Most of our population does not live within either easy pedestrian or public transit, reach of where they might work or where they might shop.
And given the trajectory, how long until you can't buy a bus pass without residency requirements?
Right.
Stuff like that.
And so I think that the reality is that anything that makes it harder to drive legally on Tennessee roads is going to have now it might discourage some number of people from driving, but most people are still going to have to drive. Like, right. It's just just the way it is. So then you're creating de facto, you're kind of putting more outlaws on the road by creating more outlaws. And so that's part of it. The other thing that I think is just worth noting is that I myself have rented cars in countries where I didn't speak the language, specifically in Spain and Bosnia. And when I did that, I did spend a little time studying the road signs in those places, as I did I've rented cars in the United Kingdom too, where I do speak the language, but their road signs are all different. Plus they drive on the wrong side of the road. And in all of those cases,
I think you mean the left side of the road.
Yeah, yes, exactly. In all of those cases, I was able to drive fine. In fact, because of the weird thing of driving on the left in the UK, it's, for an American, I found it was harder to drive in the UK, even though I did speak the language, than it was to drive in Spain or the Balkans, where I definitely did not speak the languages. And, most road signs are constructed to be pretty legible at a distance and quickly. And so, it's just a lot of, if you see red, be ready to stop. If you see yellow, slow down. So how much English proficiency do you need to be able to drive around Knoxville? Not very much. Where it could come up is, of course, if you get in an accident, if something happens, if you need help, that could certainly be a challenge. But anyway, that's part of one of the bills.
Well, I think as we continue on with the more bills, I think this is just as much about building a framework to make things difficult to disincentivize people from coming here in the first place.
That's right. Or to encourage people who are already here to leave. That's the push behind this. All of this has economic impacts. The Tennessee Immigration and Refugee Rights Group that advocates for immigrant rights in Tennessee has estimated that immigrants, all immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, contribute about $1.4 billion a year to the state in taxes alone. And that's, of course, mostly going to be through sales taxes.
And what did Sexton said, 96 million or something like that in social services that they estimate are getting spent on?
Right. And a lot of that,
I love the logic. Let's burn $2 billion to save $100 million.
Right. And a lot of that money, I assume he's including school spending in that, which, and we talked about this the other week last month when the school board was discussing the whole issue of undocumented students. But that's not even optional right now. Under existing federal law via a Supreme Court decision, schools are required to enroll students regardless of their immigration status. So that's going to be where a lot of that money is being spent. Now, among the bills that is being talked about again at the legislature, which is why the school board weighed in on this last month, is a bill that would challenge that and would require schools to check everybody's immigration status. And it would at least give local districts the option of just refusing to serve or charging tuition to undocumented students. So that's part of the mix too. The one other bill I wanted to mention, HB 1710, would require state and local governments to ascertain the immigration status, the legal status of anybody who is receiving any kind of local benefit, whether that's services at the county health department. I don't know if it would apply to like getting a library card, because it's not like you get money for having a library card, but you are using public resources. So, a lot of this is about taking what has been traditionally totally a federal concern, not at all something that local and state governments were expected to deal with, and pushing it down to the level where local government clerks in a whole bunch of offices are suddenly going to have to be trying to check people's immigration statuses. And this can get really complicated, because if you think about the kinds of benefits somebody might be receiving, like let's say it's even something like a home energy efficiency grant, one of those things that comes through CAC that goes and serves a whole household. Well, there are plenty of households in Knoxville and everywhere else that have mixed statuses. The parents might be undocumented immigrants and the kids might be U.S. citizens. One of the parents might have a legal status of some kind. The other parent might not. One of the kids maybe, came into the country when they were little and might be undocumented, and they might have a sibling who is a citizen. And so trying to ascertain all of that about every single person who receives these kinds of services from local and state agencies, I mean, you're talking about creating a whole bunch of new bureaucratic work for all of these offices, all geared toward the denial of services to, a minority of people. But everybody who uses these services is going to have to run this
right. And as the
gauntlet,
as the natural-born U.S. citizen, white, middle-aged male that I am, that is the most closely visually aligned with all the people in Nashville that are working on this stuff, is I don't want to put up with this. Like, you could have your feelings on immigration and stuff like that, but we're going to end up having to pay for this too in one way or the other, whether it's when I go to get my registration renewed and I just go in and pop in the clerk's office like I used to and be like, here's your thing, here's my $35 or whatever it is now, I'll see you later. They're like, well, I need your ID, need your birth certificate, show me your passport, get your real ID out because you did all that other stuff before, whatever it is. Am I going to have to, as a parent in Knox County Schools, to fill out another form? Do more energy and effort into doing that stuff. Send them copies of the kids' birth certificates or whatever it is that they're going to need to verify these things. And so just in like the whole, like, I thought we were a nation and due process and, all that kind of stuff thing. Like, this is putting a bunch of extra energy and effort onto me in the fully selfish view of it. And it's like, am I willing to pay this cost for the other side of what they're trying to do here?
And it's changing an equation that has typically, kind of assumed that if you're here, and all of these things that you're talking about already require a certain level. Like, it's not like you walk into any government service and they just give you stuff without you having to tell them who you are and whatever. So we already do that. But there's been sort of a base level assumption that, like, if you're here, you're not creating problems, you're here. And there's an assumption that it's okay for you to be here. We're shifting that to an assumption that nobody is assumed to be okay to be here. Everybody has to be able to prove on demand at any point, whether it's from a police officer, an ICE officer, or the county clerk's office, that yes, you are who you say you are, and yes, you are allowed to be here. And when you do that, I mean, you're giving the government more power. That's a lot of what this is. You're vesting more power in government agencies and services to make their own determination about whether they think you deserve to be here and deserve to receive these things. And that's the balance that it's certainly present in all of these bills. We're early in the session. There will certainly be discussion of these, but the Republicans have, super majorities in the state House and Senate. They can pass these bills if they want to. These are being pushed by the leadership. They're supported by Governor Bill Lee. Hard to, the issue of undocumented students in school, that might still generate some pushback. We'll see.
Well, that one's intended to test the Supreme Court case.
That's the one that is clearly violating existing law.
And again, like, to me, as the more layman watcher of all this kind of stuff, is that it's not fair to take these bills on face value anymore. Like, you've got to take them in the context. You can't just say, okay, well, that makes sense to me. Because some of these do, like, and I've said it on my show a number of times, and I'll say it to your audience as well, is that a lot of these bills, like, they make sense as written in and of their own, process and policy. And you could be like, okay, I can agree with that. But the one thing that to keep it in context is that you've got to remember the trade-off here, because nothing's free in any version of these things. There will be a trade-off, and whether that trade-off is you have to provide more information, or we're going to live in a world where you're walking down in Market Square and somebody with a badge on gets to say, "Show me your ID," while you're walking in a public space, and we have to we have to respect that by law, or any of the other variants that are in play here. That there is a trade-off, and is what we're quote fixing worth what it's going to cost is something that you have to ask yourself and then communicate that with your elected officials. And so, because I think it's really easy to just look at them individually and be like, okay, I get it. That makes sense. Like, if you're not a legal resident, you shouldn't get a driver's license in the state. I can get on board with that premise, but at what cost? And I think it's unfair to just assume that it's free. And I don't know. That's my piece.
That it doesn't have other effects. Right.
This is what you get with Scott's not on the show, people. You get a lot more of me.
Well, we will.
And I'm not a journalist, so I have no obligation to be fair or right or any of that kind of stuff.
We'll be following all these bills as they move along. Another thing to just mention quickly, because it was kind of interesting, City Council this past week delayed approving a grant. It's $60,000 in youth mental health grants that were going to go to 6 different local nonprofits that work with local youth. So, very small grants to 6 different local groups. A pretty pro forma thing that typically will just fly through city council approval. But because we have 5 new city council members who are kind of getting their feet wet and figuring out how everything works. Some of them raised some questions about this, wanted to make sure they understood it, how it worked, how the approval process worked for the different agencies that are going to be awarded these. Councilman Denzel Grant, who's the new District 6 representative, who himself formerly ran a nonprofit that received city funding, and that got kind of crosswise with the Kincannon administration, ended up ending that relationship before Grant ran for office. And now he's on council, having been through that experience from the other side. He raised questions about this, and Matthew DeBartolabin and Nathan Honeycutt, two of the other new council members, said they would like to hear some more about it too. So they're going to get some more information about it. The most likely thing is this just comes back at the next meeting and gets approved. And probably, I mean, this isn't necessarily a sign that, this new council is going to be slowing down and looking at every single thing. But I think anytime you get new council members on there, a lot gets thrown at you in a hurry, and you're casting votes on things that actually affect, have real world effects. You're approving money and approving programs. This is probably a lot of this is just those council members developing a comfort level where they can feel like, okay, if I see this on the agenda, I know what it means and I trust the process that it's been through.
Now, I was curious if Grant had having been on the other side of it and with the awkward dissolution of his nonprofit or of his grant agreement with the city, was if part of his motivation here was to ensure that a future grant recipient doesn't have to go through some of the issues that he did with his, because that was all a reporting issue and stuff like that. Was any of that spoken?
I mean, what he said was that he just wanted to understand it more and the reasoning behind it and the kind of equitability of it. Because one thing he pointed out was that although it's the same amount of money going to all of these different organizations, they're actually quite different organizations. The groups, if you're curious, are Centro Hispano, the Knoxville Leadership Foundation, Girl Talk Incorporated, Genesi Charitable Birth Services, the YWCA of Knoxville, and the Verb Kind. And, Grant noted that if you looked at the proposals that all those groups had put together for this funding, one of them said they're going to use it to serve 400 to 500 kids, and another one said they're going to use it to serve like 10 kids. Now, those are very different programs, and that reflects the difference in sort of size and scope. And, a lot of these organizations have they all have other sources of funding and bigger or smaller budgets. And so that's a lot of what that's going to reflect. But yeah, it just sounded like he wanted to slow it down a little bit, understand it more. We'll see if it becomes any kind of pattern, but it felt like just kind of a, new council who this kind of situation where they're just kind of figuring things out. But it's just interesting. It's interesting to watch, when we get these kind of changeovers, especially where now we have more than half of city council has only been on council for a month. I think it's natural to.
Right. They don't get to spend the first 6 months working with the person they're replacing to get up to speed on all these things. It's
you're thrown straight into it, and then you got to vote on stuff.
A couple quick workshops and maybe an orientation day, and it's time to get to work.
That's right. So now we are to let's go to our little conversation here with Thomas Frazier. He is a correspondent. He's a longtime local journalist. And he has been writing for Compass in recent months with a specialty kind of in environmental and science writing. And he wrote a story this week on the science side of that equation, although it does have environmental ramifications, which we talked about. And this is a project that Oak Ridge National Lab is working on with some partners, including the University of Tennessee, to develop fusion-based power generation. So I asked Thomas to call in so we could talk about this because I thought it would help to have the perspective of the person who actually spent time understanding it and writing about it. So Seth, let's go ahead and play that. So we are joined by Compass correspondent Thomas Frazier. Thomas, thanks for calling in. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I wanted to bring you in to talk about this because this is a bit of a technical story, and I want to make sure we are accurately conveying your reporting about this fusion project at ORNL. Obviously, and you talk about this in the story, fusion has kind of been the great dream of power power generation for a long time. So can you just kind of give the background of this, and what is ORNL's role going to be in it?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, Oak Ridge kind of got its start with fission and its role in producing the atomic bombs that were ultimately dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And, of course, they have since dabbled in a lot of various types of nuclear technology, including a variety of different reactor types. But now, they're going to turn their eye more aggressively toward developing fusion, which is, has long been kind of a pie in the sky aspiration for electricity sources. But, a lot of advances have been made in recent years to the point that, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a viable fusion energy plant within, the next decade.
And
so fusion, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask, what is that? Like, what actually in this model that they're working on, where does that energy come from? Like, what are they making fusion from?
Well, in order to create fusion, which of course occurs naturally in the sun, I kind of referenced that in my article, but fusion is powered in the sun by its immense gravity, which kind of negates the tendency of atomic particles to naturally repel each other, positive and a negative. So that fusion process in the sun, of course, creates immense amounts of heat, which, pretty much support life on Earth. However, the drawback on Earth is you have to create a bunch of heat to successfully negate the natural tendencies of atomic particles to kind of repel each other. So that takes incredible amounts of heat, which, obviously poses a lot of problems. You don't want to create so much heat that it takes more energy to create the heat, and then the energy you would derive from the fusion process, So basically what they're doing now in Oak Ridge with the establishment of this new fusion campus with Energy One and TVA and ORNL and UT, they're going to use plasma to create immensely high temperatures, like 23 million degrees Fahrenheit, I believe.
Wow.
Is the magic number. And then it's, once they do that, then they can essentially fuse atomic particles together, which, voila, you have fusion on Earth.
And why was Oak Ridge selected for this? I mean, obviously, as you say, the lab has a long history of energy research.
Right. Well, materials research is really the big driver here, I think, because one challenge is when you're dealing with this much heat, you need some pretty durable materials to kind of interface with the plant, from the fusion source. So its background in material sciences kind of set it up for that, as well as, the nuclear engineering department at UT is top notch. And then, of course, there's the natural background of in nuclear reactors that, Oak Ridge has.
And this is being done, kind of interestingly, on the site of the old Bull Run coal-fired plant, right? So kind of literally going where an older form of energy production has been mothballed in order to do this research.
Yeah, that is kind of ironic. Bull Run operated for decades out at Claxton on the Clinch River, and And in so doing, it emitted a bunch of fine particles and waste byproducts that needed to be stored that are very environmentally harmful. So in a way, you've come full circle, because fusion is kind of the holy grail of clean energy. Once they harness that technology, then it's theoretically a limitless source of energy.
And so what's the time frame on this? Like, what are they actually building, and when will it be up and doing whatever it's going to do?
Well, Energy One, as part of this announcement, they're going to work with ORNL, engineers, and TVA and UT to go ahead and build kind of it's called a test bed, but basically it's kind of a prototype of a fusion reactor. And it's called a stellarator, which is what is used to, uses magnets to heat plasma to these, unfathomable.
Yeah, I like that name, stellarator, because it sounds like something out of an Avengers movie or something.
Yeah, or Star Trek. Yeah, Engage the stellarator. You also have the word flux in there, of course,
right.
Which we all know about the value of flux capacitors.
Right.
So the timeline is they're going to build like this, basically a prototype facility, and then start work this year, and it's going to build out pretty quickly by, I believe ORNL said by 2026. They hope to really have the building blocks in place for what they say would be a 350 megawatt fusion plant, which would be pretty remarkable. But it all comes down to, the efficiency and using that much energy to generate energy. You've got to have that net benefit, or it's just a wash. So, it'll come up pretty soon.
And this is energy
and Oak Ridge was awarded. Go ahead.
Well, this would come without carbon emissions, right? Like that's part of the dream here.
Yeah, which is, again, that kind of dovetails with the closure and the decommissioning of the Bull Run fossil plant by TVA. It ran for years on coal, and TVA is mothballing, of course, a lot of its. They're tearing down beyond mothballing. They're totally weaning themselves off of coal, which, is a positive for the amount of carbon that gets dumped in the atmosphere and contributes to global climate change. But some people are concerned that TVA is a little bit too enamored of natural gas, fossil gas, which has its own environmental problems, mainly through the difficulty in really efficiently containing the gas.
Right. All right. Well, thanks for the overview. It's quite a thing to be happening. I mean, like so much that happens at ORNL right here in our backyard, just world-class research and development. So thanks for your reporting and helping to explain it to us here. Also, I should mention that Thomas is also the editor and publisher of Hellbender Press, the environmental journal of Southern Appalachia, which you can find at hellbenderpress.org, and they do a lot of good coverage of environmental issues in our region. So, Thomas, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate the time.
Okay, the one other thing I wanted to mention from last week is that Natalie Haslam passed away at the age of 94. Probably anybody listening to this podcast knows who Natalie Haslam was. She was the wife of Jim Haslam, founder of Pilot Company, and the two of them have been, like, it would be hard to exaggerate their philanthropic impact in Knoxville and Knox County and across East Tennessee over the last many decades. They've been really one of our most prominent business and political families, of course, Bill Haslam, former governor, former Knoxville mayor, Bill Haslam is part of that family. He's one of the sons of Jim Haslam. Natalie Haslam was actually Jim Haslam's second wife after his first wife passed away in the 1970s. They got married, and she very much took on a leading civic role, especially when it came to arts and culture funding. That was really her passion, and she drove a lot of their giving there, most prominently and obviously at the University of Tennessee, where the College of Music bears her name because of her and the family's generous support there. And lots of people came out, people from across the political spectrum, across sort of many spectrums across Knoxville, came out to pay tribute to her because, there are not many institutions of any kind in Knoxville that haven't been to one degree or another touched by the Haslams over the years. So don't really have anything else to add there. I just wanted to acknowledge it because she was a very significant person in Knoxville's civic life. All right. Well, looking ahead to the coming week, just a couple of things to mention. County Commission will hold its monthly voting meeting Monday at 5 p.m. in the main assembly room of the City County building. Not a super packed agenda this week. One interesting thing is Commissioner Andy Fox is planning to give a presentation on the what the Bible says about illegal immigration. And during the agenda review meeting that they had last week, when Fox was questioned about, what are you doing here? He said that he wants to respond to arguments that people are making. He didn't really name who he's talking about, but I think he just sort of means people on the internet who he disagrees with, or maybe especially there are a lot of Christian pastors and ministers out there these days, and of course up to and including our current Pope Leo, and his predecessor, Pope Francis, both been very strong supporters of immigrants and refugees and kind of imploring governments around the world to not demonize them and victimize them, and emphasizing this idea that Christianity and the message of Christ calls for bringing people in and welcoming them and not targeting them for enforcement with masked armed agents and that kind of thing. And Fox, who is a cultural conservative and a conservative Christian, disagrees with those arguments. And so he wants to make a presentation to County Commission about what the Bible, in his view, says about this, which I think we can anticipate is going to be to say that no, Christianity does not require you to care for undocumented people in your midst. One county commissioner, Larson J., kind of asked, why are you taking up time in a county commission meeting to do this? And is this kind of opening the door to other commissioners to just make philosophical presentations or religious presentations? But Fox said it has bearing on some of the issues that they are talking about. One of those actually is a resolution sponsored by one of the other cultural conservatives on commission, Commissioner Rhonda Lee, has a resolution that seems to be sort of trying to push back on the Knox County School Board. The school board, of course, in December they added to their legislative agenda for the year, asking the legislature not to pass that bill that would basically force school systems to ascertain the immigration status of all their students. So that's the position the school board took. Lee's resolution basically says the school board is getting this wrong, and says that the county commission understands that this is not imposing new mandates on school systems and is just giving them the option to refuse services to undocumented immigrants if they want to. The way I read the proposed bill, or the version of it that passed the state Senate, I think Lee is not actually right. The bill clearly mandates that school systems have to, it's not that they have the option of ascertaining the legal status. It says that they have to, for all 58,000 plus of their students, ascertain the legal status. The option that it gives is then whether the school system wants to deny them services or charge them tuition, but it still would mandate that level of administration that we talked about before for all students in the system. So it's not, at least the way that I read the bill that passed in the Senate, it's not accurate to say that it doesn't impose anything on school systems. It pretty clearly does. But Lee then kind of goes beyond that in her resolution to say that County Commission actually encourages the legislature to pass this bill. Now, this is unusual because County Commission has already approved a legislative agenda for this year. This item is not on it. And also, it's a little bit outside their bailiwick, as County Commissioner Larson J. again, raised questions about this and said, noted that County Commission doesn't actually have any control over school policy and that it has typically left legislative positions on school policy to the school board. It would be unusual for County Commission to be in a little bit of a back and forth with the school board. Nevertheless, that resolution is on there. Lee has sponsored it, and so County Commission will dispose with that one way or the other. That meeting again, 5:00 on Monday. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is this coming Saturday, there will be a legislative breakfast sponsored by the League of Women Voters. This is something they do every year. It's going to be at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA building in East Knoxville at 9 a.m. And there will be some number of Knox County state legislators there to just kind of talk through major items that they expect to see on the legislative agenda this year. Very much, I'm sure, we'll be talking about the immigration bills. And when I say we will be talking about it, that's because I am going to be moderating that, although I will not be generating the questions, just so everybody knows. Questions come from audience members. I'm just there to kind of ask those questions and move the discussion along. But anyway, again, that is scheduled for Saturday, January 31st, and it's at 9 a.m. at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA. So come on out and join us. And I think that wraps us up for this week. We will be back next week to talk about anything that happens between now and then. As always, thanks to Lord Seth Barber, and again this week for going above and beyond, contributing to the conversation here. Thanks to Will Wright for our theme music, and we'll talk to you next week.
CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.